I ate a sandwich and Jim was making mac and cheese, so it was easy.
You can send them.
Hard to eat and be at a meeting by 6.
Yeah, I have a nice relationship.
Thank you. Push this to talk. Is that the key?
Green light is on, you're live.
Oh,
Push the button, turn it off.
you push the button. Ah. I'm turning it
Oh,
off.
how'd that go for sleeping?
Yes. Yes. And we're muted.
Okay, so when the
Just
lights-
push it. Yeah, that.
That's the work session.
Is
push
light
it.
on live?
Right.
21.
No.
I just.
Yes. But other than that,
No, we're gonna talk about the alley project.
Yeah, I do.
It's
I know.
really, you're gonna have plenty of
Pretty
time.
mousy.
I am, it's true, it's true. I don't think there's anything right now.
yeah, a few tomatoes. I've got some tomatillos. I haven't pulled those yet. And I've left my garlic in, but other than that.
Sammy,
Yes,
I've got.
could you send me an invitation for the council meeting
Yeah.
for the,
on Zoom so I can have
Yeah.
my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
A friend of mine this year-
Dirty glasses.
Yeah,
Gotta figure out some way to wear them with a mask. Have them in the bag.
oh, I know. Good luck with that.
The hill there.
You have to wear them down on your nose more.
Yeah.
They make special masks now that for glassware supposedly.
I've got some stuff I wear on my goggles when I swim. Maybe I'll try them on.
Go. You going to?
I had to learn that because I had to wear goggles in the nursing home and they fog up and finally I got a right position and I could breathe and
Do what you do.
we're properly nosed.
You do look more dignified when your glasses are on. And your nose.
About to read something and look down
Oh,
on.
I've heard, and I have a few. Wow.
Sometimes they'll get.
Can you see,
Uh-huh.
I know, Gary and I can see that television. You
I can see it, yeah.
You're fine, you're
Both are
good?
fine,
Okay. We'll have another.
That one has a better black screen.
Area.
My very first council meeting was an annexation.
Was it?
That was for the Serenity Lane area. Somehow that wasn't
Thank you, Sammy.
where Serenity Lane is.
Are you ready?
Oh, that
Yes.
was a,
Okay, folks,
recording in progress.
the recording is in progress. Let me mute. Hello? It's working. Welcome to the new technology and our first full meeting. We had a little test meeting before, but this is going to be quite the venture. So a learning experience. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for showing up late. Dinner took a little longer to cook and eat than I expected. But good turnout. I love it. I'm going to call this work session to order on October 12th of the City Council and Planning Commission at 6:03. This meeting is being video and audio recorded and live streamed. So remember, you're out there live. The meeting includes participants in person as well as by Zoom video. And we have 3 different screens that are available for people to watch. All the screens show the same thing. Roll call, Sammy?
I'm gonna start with our planning commission tonight. I have Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Marshall and Chair Paul Thompson are present. We have Don Derby, Commissioner Wood, and Commissioner Doyle not here yet. It doesn't look like Miss Doyle should be joining us shortly. From council, I have Mayor Smith, Councilor Bell, Counselor Alexander, Counselor Fox, Counselor McConnell, and Counselor Lehman. And we are missing Counselor Blank.
Thank you, Sammy. Can't get my footer to get out of the way. How many participants do we have in Zoom?
9.
9? Okay, that's what I have. Thank you. All right, so this meeting is for a discussion and process review of the annexation agreement that is probably forthcoming. And Ann, do you have a staff presentation or are we
That would be Henry.
Henry? Okay.
Hello. Sammy, will you please pull up the presentation?
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and share our screen here.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'll get started. So thank you all for being here tonight. The purpose of this work session is for you to become familiar with the annexation agreement before it comes to you in your packets as part of a public hearing. In addition to the city staff that have worked on this agreement, the applicant and their team have all provided input and feedback along the way. You can advance the next slide, please. You can go to slide 2, Sammy.
Yeah. It should be at slide 2. The second, sorry, there we go.
There we go. So an annexation agreement at its most basic element is an agreement between the city and the developer. An annexation agreement sets forth some basic facts about a property and the proposal and outlines some terms and obligations that each party will adhere to or complete as part of the annexation, and often includes provisions for such services as water and sewer. For tonight's work session, we want to avoid talking about the zoning to be applied to the property. At the end of the presentation, we're happy to open up the floor for discussion and questions you may have. The applicant and their civil engineer are here tonight to answer any questions and participate. In addition, the city engineer and city attorney are also here, and they have both provided input into this agreement. What we're looking for here tonight is for your feedback on the agreement so that we may take that back to the applicant to discuss further. Next slide, please. The water and sewer provisions. So water and sewer will both be available to the property. Currently, there is a 6-inch sewer line that crosses underneath I-5. Sewer lines will be installed to serve each property as they develop. The water line project is currently being completed and is being bored underneath I-5. When completed, there will be a 12-inch water main to connect to within 300 feet of the southwest corner of the property. With further development, the water line will need to be connected and extended along the southerly and westerly edges of the property. Next slide, please. Streets. So the applicant will be responsible for complying with street improvements imposed by the city and the county through the land development review process. However, some improvements may commence following annexation. These improvements are outlined in Exhibit D of your packets, and they include an additional 20 feet of right-of-way added to the southern portion of Van Dyne, construction of a 50-foot 6-wide roadway, sidewalk, curb, gutter, and public utility improvements, and 2 eastbound travel lanes from the property's west boundary to the access road, and the internal roadway providing access in accordance with the IAM. A traffic study has been completed by the applicant and is in the final stages of review by the city, Lane County, and ODOT. Additional traffic studies will be required upon site development because this is a requirement of the IAM. Next slide, please. Open space. So the requirement for open space is driven by the master plan requirements. The master plan process is a code requirement for properties that fall within the IAM and all properties located east of I-5. The applicant is proposing an initial allotment of a 10-acre piece of land for open space. That is an excellent opportunity to provide open space that is contiguous and fits well within the entire property. Additionally, this open space also acts as a natural landscape buffer between the property and the adjacent residential uses to the east. The initial open space will be improved with pedestrian walking paths and benches. The purpose of this open space is for employee relaxation and recreation. You may refer to Exhibit D of your packets. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about open space and landscaping a little more. In order to equitably distribute the initial allotment of open space, the applicant has proposed the following distributions of that open space to be credited to each future lot. Subsequent lots will be able to use a credit from the initial open space allotment. This credit is deducted from their 20% open space requirement for that particular parcel. In the end, after full development of all parcels, including the initial allotment of the open space, the total amount of open space cannot be less than 20% of the entire property. Each lot will require to have a minimum of 20% open space and 15% landscaping. The required landscaping percentages may be counted towards the open space requirements. And next slide, please. So I want to outline some next steps for you. Tonight is just a work session for you to become familiar with this agreement. The annexation application with concurrent zone change is going to Planning Commission on November 17th. Planning Commission will hear that application and issue a recommendation for approval or denial for both applications onto City Council for final action. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for your feedback or comments on the agreement that we can further discuss with the applicant. And Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Henry. And do we have any upfront clarifications or questions that you want to present?
Can't think of anything right now that
Okay.
Henry hasn't touched on,
Okay.
so.
At this point, do we have any questions from councilors or commissioners? Councilor McConnell.
I have a question on the open space allotment. If you could just clarify, I need my speaker on. You could just clarify, so what you're saying is that the open space allotment that's shown on Exhibit D, which is on the, I guess it would be on the east side of the property, is the only open space in the entire piece of property, and that the potential users of this can take credit from that and not have any open space in their lots. Is that what you're saying?
That's not, I don't know if Henry heard what you said. Henry, her question is that the open space that has been designated on Exhibit B is the only open space in the whole area. And
That is incorrect. That is the initial allotment of 10 acres or so. They have about under 1 million square feet of open space to dedicate, and that's only about 400,000 of that. So there is much more open space forthcoming.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I have a question also regarding what I think I heard on open space and landscaping. Henry, did I hear you say that the 15% landscaping requirement can also be used to satisfy a portion of the 20% open space requirement?
That is correct.
So then I guess my question is, what qualifies as landscaping that would meet the 15% landscaping requirement? For instance, to put sort of a worst case spin on it, would trees planted in parking lot islands be landscaping?
Yes, they would.
And so in theory, not only could the landscaping requirement, and that's may not be such a bad thing, be met by such isolated spots of planting, but that would also go towards the open space requirement.
That's correct.
That gives me a little bit of pause.
Councilor Fox.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, the open space exhibit. It looks like a walkway and two sides of a flat area where they're probably plant trees or whatever. But, and then there's natural contour, but it's like a 60-foot drop. Would there be a retaining wall there? I'm just trying to process how that's not going down.
I would refer to the applicant civil engineer about that. We're not in the construction design phase of this open space. It's largely going to remain an open space natural buffer with just an improved pedestrian path and benches.
Okay, maybe that's already there.
Other questions? Would ask the developer if he has any clarifications or questions of his own.
I think at this point, my name is Raymond Fisher. I'm the head of Raven Ventures with my
Raymond?
family.
Could I get you to go up to the mic so
Sure.
everybody can hear you?
Sure. Can you hear
Thank
me?
you. Thank you.
My name is Raymond Fisher with Raven Ventures. We're the applicant on this property. I've been part of this since Coburg Crossroads, I think it was, and IAMPS and urbanization studies. And so I kind of seen it all. So as far as clarification, I think we passed this back and forth. We've lawyered it back and forth a bunch of times with Henry and the city. And I think what the whole idea of the buffer area is Ann actually had a meeting, set up a meeting with the Diamond Ridge folks up there. And they're concerned, they have their places up there. They want to make sure that we weren't putting smokestacks up and those kind of things. And so one of the things that we talked about was how much of what's existing we could leave and that's what we've come up with the buffer area there. A lot of that is trees. It's more of an uphill area, so it's not conducive to building anyway in some places. But it's a way for us to protect those folks and kind of mollify those concerns, but also at the same time provide that landscape and open space requirement that is necessary for part of this project. So that's kind of, it's something we kind of came up with. We're almost looking at it as a credit to the end user. It's real hard right now to determine what each end user is going to be because we don't know who's going to go in there. So we're trying to guess of what an end user is going to look like. So that's this is our latest iteration of this, but we are also open to hear what you folks have to say.
I think one of my concerns is we've had an awful lot of discussion on the ingress egress to not only your proposed annex property, but the properties that are already annexed, which basically because of the IAMP, we have to provide that egress through your property, ingress egress. I guess I'm looking for a little more comment about the illustrated egress ingress issue that's on the back page. And thinking about what happened when we had Monaco Marathon develop and 2,500 employees. Is this something that would work for that? If we get over 1,000 employees and large trucks coming in and out of this, it looks like it's pretty limiting, actually.
Are you asking me?
I guess I could seek your comment, but I'm asking also our city staff too, if they have any comments on it.
I'm sure that our engineer, Damien, can.
So both of you, if we can get comment.
Now, I just want to be clear. You're asking about what's we're going to be required to access the other properties.
Right.
Yes.
That access has to go into the other properties from your property.
Yes.
In the IAMP.
Right. Well,
And we have a map that was provided to us from ODOT if it's helpful to look up of what the initial design is for that.
Maybe we could have Damien address. Looks like he's ready, our city engineer.
Hi there, I'm Damian Gilbert, your city engineer contractor. I'm with Branch Engineering. Nice to be back here, by the way. It's been a very long time. So it's a pretty complicated puzzle between the IAMP and the development, and there are so many steps that go into how all the pieces are going to fall together. But there's a lot of systems in place to assure it the end result is what everybody is thinking it should be. At this phase, as the developer just told you, nobody knows exactly what these buildings are going to look like and how they're going to operate. Some could be big warehouses with few employees, others could be lots of employees. And truck traffic varies by each user. So the traffic study that's under review right now by myself, Lane County, and ODOT is there to address the zone change and not the developments yet. The reason for that is the original IAMP is generally a conceptual framework of what that interchange would look like in the future. When that IAMP was prepared, I'm thinking it was about 10 years ago, plus or minus. The land being contemplated tonight was assumed to be agricultural, very little traffic coming off of it. The same thing with your comprehensive plan and the TSP that was that's still kind of floating out there. But all the studying of traffic out there assumed that this would be agricultural land. So the applicant has hired a traffic engineer to go through and prepare a study that looks at a reasonable worst case development scenario for this property under the proposed zoning and compare it to the existing zoning. And they're chasing cars clear into town as far as the analysis. It's not just limited to the driveway or anything like that. And they are also looking at the Industrial Way intersection, Pearl and Willamette, and others. So in general, it's going to end up with whether or not those intersections fail with the anticipated traffic. And if there's certain things that just can't function with it, there will be set horizons when certain improvements need to be made, whether it's adding a lane or constructing a traffic signal and things like that. So that's kind of step one. And that's where the frontage improvements came up, because everybody's sure that this is going to need right turn lanes into the development site. Pretty much any access really, but for sure the IAMP road that's going to be built through it. How many lots are there now? 4 total. So, okay. So each of those lots, when they get sold post zone change, will have a proposed development that will go through the city's design review process and or possibly master plan, whatever the code requires of that. But you will revisit each development as it, or at least the planning commission will, as it comes. Each of those developments needs to do an actual traffic impact analysis for their development with a known use and relook at certain intersections. And so incrementally, as things build out, the city, the county, ODOT will be rechecking these intersections and these facilities. Now, sort of parallel to that process, ODOT will be working towards funding and designing an interchange improvement. Likely they'll need to, I can't speak for them, but my guess is they'll need to amend the IAMP first to recognize this property as it's proposed to be zoned, assuming that the annexation and zoning moves forward. So then they will build a bridge, and it will also, that IAMP will have the information from all these studies, and slowly, piece by piece, when the bridge gets built, and let's say the developer of lot number 3 builds a traffic signal at the ramps, hypothetical, it may or may not happen. All these pieces will supposedly work together. And at the end, which could be many, many years from now, you would have a transportation system that did contemplate this development as the industrial use.
Does the illustration, is that part of the annex, or is there flexibility in that
Uh,
illustrated
it's-
egress ingress?
As far as flexibility, probably more of a legal question, but it is an exhibit in the annexation agreement. And we put words in there for minimum right-of-way improvements or approximates, and those they're generally, they're adequate to construct the turn lane and the sidewalk and things like that. Now, if the study comes in and says the final one, well, let's say the northeast corner lot develops and they do a traffic study, and if they wanted another driveway, maybe at the center or east end of their property, not closer to the interchange, but further away, they would have to study that, and perhaps they need a turn lane. And to do that, part of their development through the city under design review, site review, would likely end up with a condition of approval that says you need to dedicate X number of feet and approximately to construct an additional eastbound travel lane. Is that-
So each of these developments, whether master plan or other, as they're developed, will have that opportunity to deal with the traffic control analysis and look at improvements to accommodate that.
Correct. Yeah, this, there will be nothing built with this application, maybe some roads or such, but the traffic study and the information we have today is very big picture, and it's more looking for catastrophic failure, or can this bridge even handle a part of this traffic, or do you need one of the big ones we've been looking closely at is, do we need a traffic signal at the southbound ramps ahead of time, which so far the answer is no, but we don't, again, we don't have detailed traffic information for the first building, but the planning commission with staff recommendations gets the opportunity to impose that if it's justified under lot 1 or lot 2 or whenever it becomes necessary.
So one of my concerns is it's not just the current developer versus the annexation. It's that this has to provide access to the other properties, all of the properties that are on the east side within the city limits.
Right.
And do we have the flexibility? Do we have the authority to make these work? I mean, do you have concerns about that, or are we good as far as laying out what needs to happen to provide that transportation?
I think we need some clarity from ODOT. The way I understand it, and this is probably correct, but it may not be. I'm a little fuzzy on when ODOT closes the driveways for the former Squire site and the gas station and Premier RV. In the IAMP phase 1, if you recall, when they bought property and bought access from developments on the west side of the freeway. That was part of the project. So the interchange project. So as the interchange is getting designed, they have a right-of-way process where they acquire and purchase right-of-way and condemn driveways. My hunch is that's when their driveways get closed. I don't think the city has the authority. Well, the city does not have the authority today because it's not a city street, and it's a county road up to a point, and within X number of feet to the interchange, it becomes ODOT authority. And so I'm not sure either of those agencies would close the driveways before the interchange improvements happen.
I do
But
have a comment about
okay,
that.
okay.
I spoke with ODOT today and asked them the specific question. What they said was that they would like to see the driveways closed at the time that the access road was built. But they are not clear that they have the ability to force that, and that is in review at ODOT right now.
So are we going to, is part of this demand? I don't know if demand's the right word, but if part of the expectation is to upgrade Van Dyne to get to this point, is there a conflict there that we want to upgrade Van Dyne and not allow that access? Is this what you're talking about, that we can't block them off?
Right.
Even though we're building for the access?
Correct. So the frontage improvements would be just that, frontage improvements plus maybe some ancillary tapers for safety and such. But this application would not be building frontage improvements in front of the gas station, and I'll just call it the former Squire property, or shutting down driveways. I just don't see that authority there unless ODOT has a means of doing it. The other piece of this is the annexation property. They'll build backbone infrastructure of this access road along their frontage in accordance with the IAMP and through their property to serve their properties. They really have no obligation or ability to build the road on their neighbor's property, where I believe that would be a cul-de-sac is what I've seen in the ODOT schematics. So that's where, as part of this IAMP funding to do phase 2 of the interchange, they're buying driveways, doing frontage improvements on properties that are not going through an application process, building access roads similar to South Industrial Way was built across the old Shell station property. That's my expectation as to how it would work out. But again, I guess we need to wait for ODOT's formal answer as to when.
So for clarification for people, the IAMP is, I believe it's the Interstate Access Management Plan that was referred to earlier, that's been going on for over a decade.
Very close, interchange area management plan.
So
Yeah.
that's what IAMP is. It's referring to that east side that we've done, already been through one on the west side of the interstate bridge. And so the east side.
Correct.
So the next question, Damian, is who is responsible from the interstate bridge down to the potential annex property for that road upgrade?
Well, it is in front of somebody else's property and potentially encroaching on somebody else's property. So ideally, if we set this project aside, ODOT purchases and condemns, or however their process ends up going, the property and building the frontage improvements across the neighbors' properties. Now, if there is let's say building 3 comes in and it's a heavy trip generator and it can't function according to the traffic study before it gets built without having 2 full lanes extending, they might be replacing a bridge in order to get that lot 3 done if it comes before ODOT builds the bridge. So the traffic studies ensure that the infrastructure is there, but it doesn't necessarily build the infrastructure. If that makes any sense.
I've heard comment from ODOT that says that if that situation comes up, ODOT says there's statute that says they have to assume that the bridge is built.
Under the zone change, they do. Under the TIA, they do not, I believe. The city doesn't have to assume that, even though it's not a city facility.
Okay, I don't know if Raymond had a question, but also Counselor.
I just had a comment to follow up. My
Sure.
experience with ODOT as they came in, I believe it's 2018, and they staked the new right of way where it would go. And at that point, they were said they were getting ready to they wanted to either buy it or lease the land underneath the road. So to me, that was it was part of their whole plan on replacing the bridge. They were putting together an entire package, and that was what the thought. But again, they did all that, and then they went. I haven't heard from them since. So I think it's all based on where the funding goes. If a bunch of funding goes north, then we don't hear from them for a while.
And I know that we did get funding, ODOT did get funding to do preliminary design work on it. And that's basically, I believe, when they started. So that, and it's pencil and paper still. not excavators and cement yet.
Correct.
Counselor Bell, did you have a
I
question?
did have a question, and this is for the engineer. When you said, you know, if there was not a bridge in place, but the purchaser of lot 3 was going to need a heavier bridge than is currently there, they would have to build it. Is they the people that bought lot 3?
If they want to build something intensive enough that the current infrastructure cannot accommodate it, they need to either build it or back off their development. It's a fairly routine thing. Bridges are not. It did happen with a big development over on Good Pasture in Eugene where they widened that Good Pasture Bridge. But normally what you see is a commercial development or an industrial development goes in one lot and, oh, they have too much traffic, the delay is too much, they have to put in a traffic signal at their driveway, or one of the traffic signals down the road doesn't have enough storage, so they had to widen the road and put in a turn lane or something like
But
that.
again, they would be
The developer,
person, the
yes.
developer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why you have a traffic impact analysis in your code.
Very quickly, I can say unequivocally, if I have to build a bridge, we're gonna wait. So not even there isn't anything to worry about there.
Yeah, there's from the zone change perspective, there's been nothing suggesting that a bridge is needed.
Counselor Alexander.
How do you define worst case scenario, or how is that defined?
Well, you you look at the proposed zone and you open up your code book for permitted uses, outright permitted uses in the code. And you pick what's called a reasonable worst case. So you don't have to pick the very worst building for each one, but you do assume that maximum coverage takes place for the building footprints and a fairly intensive use. And one was proposed, basically industrial is an easy one because there are generic by the acre light, medium industrial trip generation rates. So that this one was a lot easier than if you're going from, say, a residential lot to a commercial lot where you don't know if it's going to be a fast food restaurant or a gas station or just an ice cream shop or something like that. So in this case, it was pretty simple. How much building can you put on the property? And then you just apply industry standard trip generation rates for light, medium industrial.
Commissioner Marshall.
Questions. You said that ODOT did not in their original plans, and I assume in this design that they came up with, did not include this property as being light industrial, but they included it as agricultural.
Correct, because that is the zoning is agricultural.
Their current design, is that adequate?
They just started designing it and they're well aware of this zone change that's coming. So
I thought the design had been completed.
No, not that I know of.
It's in a design phase, but there's no engineering. I mean, I think the only funding they got was for design. We do have a picture that they sent me today, but I don't know how helpful it would be for you.
Right.
We can put it up, but I'm not sure how helpful it would be.
It's actually not very helpful. That's a picture from a year or two ago, and it's still 2 lanes going down Van Dyne. But ODOT is a party to the review process on this.
So they would use your traffic worst case scenario impact study?
Right. To be clear, it's not mine. I'm just reviewing it on behalf of the city, but the developer's consultant is writing a traffic study for the worst case and ODOT is reviewing it. This ODOT wouldn't recommend approval of the project until they approve the traffic study for the zone change.
And on a timing situation, what's the ODOT as they came up with a design that's adequate for the worst case scenario? So that leaves development free and clear to go ahead and occur. What happens with the actual work that ODOT is supposed to be done, is that gonna be done in conjunction with the development, or do we wait? Or will it just be done whenever?
Well, as I started, there's multiple pieces moving and none are guaranteed. So we have all these little steps and all these checks to make sure that nothing proceeds too fast without adequate infrastructure. But ODOT doesn't have funding to build the improvements yet. They have a plan to build them and they're designing them with the anticipation that they will have funding in the next 5 to 10 years. Similarly, on the developer's side, I'm sure you would love to sell all 4 of your lots tomorrow, but maybe one sells and maybe the other 3 sit. So
Totally understand that, but can he go ahead and do his development regardless what ODOT's schedule happens to be?
he can do his own change. He can build his infrastructure and divide the lots into 4 is basically what the annexation agreement is giving permission to do. And to annex into the territory of the city.
I would just
That
clarify,
happens,
the annexation agreement does not authorize the division of land.
right,
That's a separate process.
correct, but that authorizes moving forward with a subdivision application.
Correct, with your, yep, that's right.
So, thank you, Henry. So once that happens, you have a plat and land and some improvements. When lot 1 sells, that new owner has to come before the planning commission with a development review that includes a traffic impact analysis. And if the frontage improvements being imposed on the annexation is found adequate, then they just move forward and build their first building.
Even though that the ODOT hasn't done theirs.
Correct. And that's if ODOT hasn't done it, which is assumingly going to be the case for the first lot at least. So, but that building still needs to do a study and look at traffic signals and make sure that the infrastructure is adequate. And
But I guess my point is that you can do the traffic input study, but does the study rely upon the fact or put in there that the interchange is going to be done sometime in the future?
it will mention it and it can rely on it provided that it's found to be okay without it also. They will not be allowed to build a building with intersections or a bridge that's projected to fail if the bridge isn't there. So it would be a condition of approval. Yes, you have approval to build your warehouse once the bridge is occupiable that ODOT builds. But we've been looking at a lot of big picture numbers and nothing is suggesting that the widening of the bridge is necessary to accommodate this reasonable worst case traffic, which will cover at least the first 2 or 3 lots, I would assume. But again, each lot checks the infrastructure with a traffic study, a more detailed one.
He also mentioned that the intersections will go beyond just right there, but you're also going to be looking at Willamette and Pearl. How far out do you go in your traffic impact? Or looking at that traffic impact?
I believe they went as far as Van Dyne and Willamette is the furthest one that they looked at least into town. Just north here, the dog leg in the road, where you turn and head out of town on the north side there, before the fire station and school.
Okay.
So yes, complex stuff, but the important part is all of this application is separate from and before your actual development applications that you have in place in code, such as it'll go through potentially a master plan. I'm not positive about that one, but subdivision, site development applications that may or may not be master plan, but they will be design review in front of the planning commission. And each one of those will assumingly break the threshold of triggering a traffic impact analysis.
Counselor Alexander.
Yeah, do all the same laws and bylaws apply if one person comes and buys all 4 lots?
Yes,
Okay, so
Yeah, right.
they're treated exactly the same as if they're 4 owners or just one.
right.
Counselor Fox.
It's more of a comment. I just appreciate the discussion because I remember when Monica was here at full steam. Some planning must not have happened because we had to have a traffic officer for a couple of years before the traffic light went in. And then fortunately for any future development, ODOT built the whole access road because I-5 was getting backed up for all these ships.
My guess is that's why you have the IAMP in place. Coburg was a fairly early city, or the Coburg interchange was a fairly early interchange to be involved in an IAMP. They usually reserve those for Woodburn or bigger city areas that involve a lot of property acquisition and just a lot of planning ahead to actually get improvements built. They're starting to do them more, I believe. Cresswell's looking at one now. Anyway, but yes, I remember traffic backed up on the freeway very far south.
Coburg's a little engine that could.
Yep. There are strategies in traffic impact analyses. I've prepared a lot of them in my career, and once in a while you run into something that is just too much traffic for the infrastructure, and there's tools out there you can require and put on a deed that there's staggered shifts or something like that to avoid problems.
Would it be helpful for Henry just to kind of walk through the steps? I mean, this annexation agreement covers annexing the property into the city. But would it be helpful to walk through the steps of what happens after that as far as development, or is that clear?
It sounds to me like there's one thing that I guess Henry could help us with, and that is what are the tools that we have as a city to look at beyond the city engineer looking at the TIA and saying, we got some problems here. What are the actual tools that the city has to ask that developer to provide the infrastructure needed for this or not build?
Those would be driven by the findings of the TIA. And cities can often require offsite improvements, but they have to be tied to a nexus. They have to be tied to some requirement. The city can't just require improvements that don't relate to the property or don't get at the issue. But if with respect to traffic improvements, those would be driven by the TIA itself. So like Damien said, conditions of approval would be appropriate if they're found to be required.
I guess my question is, do we have those requirements? Are we able to enforce those requirements in Coburg, or are we relying on some other outside entity to work with this?
Yes, I would. Yes, Coburg would have those. Gary, it looks like you want to provide a comment on that.
Just point out that when the development is ready, that is the owner of the property wants to do development, the zoning is changed, they have to come to you for site review, design review, and work it within your code. So you've got pretty complete control over all the impacts that are likely to be associated with whatever development is proposed.
Question. So can the code be changed after the design's been submitted, or does the code need to be in place prior to the design?
Unless the city in the annexation agreement or subsequent agreements works out an arrangement with the developer to freeze the zoning for up to 7 years, yes, the zoning can change. Let's say the property is rezoned, nothing happens, you change some of the site review requirements, they apply to whatever development comes in subsequently.
Guess what I'm saying is we need to be smart in what our zoning requirements are so that we don't get stuck with someone submitting a plan that we hadn't thought of in advance that we don't want, but yet we have our zoning allowing what is being requested.
Well, your zoning ordinance has, depending on the zone, a list of outright permitted uses, a list of uses allowed conditionally. And then when they come in, they either come through a conditional use permit, or if they're outright permitted in their light industrial, they still have to go through site review. So you can change the type of uses that are allowed in each category, taking some out, adding some in, being more specific, and you can change the review standards that you have there now. So you've got quite a bit of control, but you need to anticipate what kind of controls that you're going to need.
So my question, Damian, I guess, is it seems in my experience that specifically relating to traffic, when that comes up, we basically have accept a engineering standard that says so many cars are allowed and this storage is allowed. And that's fine for an engineering standard, but then the public says that's not our standard. Well, it is, because we have no other standard. And is that engineering standard the norm that we're going to be comfortable with and answer to, or does Coburg need its standard?
Great question. Your TIA code is fairly typical of most communities. I'm thinking back to Old Dominion, Camping World, McDonald's. All of those had to prepare traffic impact analysis. And they basically look at delay and capacity of intersections. And there are standards out there that are set that are pretty, I guess, consistent community to community. Once in a while, you will run into a community that says, you know what, we are not okay with level of service D. We want level of service C. That's definitely something you can contemplate in a code review. But yours is what I would consider fairly standard, other than the threshold for requiring one is very low in Coburg. You will get a traffic study on pretty much any commercial development.
Are you, as a city engineer, comfortable with that?
I am, yeah. Another example, I haven't seen cars backed up, but I haven't been out here in the morning. The Hayden Homes subdivision had a traffic impact analysis, and there's a lot of people were worried that there was a lot of houses to be built at once. And I guess that's an example of land that was bare that has a lot of cars coming out of it now, and whether or not it's
Well, I
adequate
guess
for
that's,
Coburg.
I guess that's my experience is that specific development where, you know, the numbers were quoted and everybody's like, well, and you're saying, well, those are normal numbers, actually low numbers, but Coburg, the residents are saying, those are outrageous numbers. But we didn't have any other standard except
What's in your code?
what I assume is an engineering standard that says, yeah, this is low.
Right. So your code was constructed assumingly from a model code and is probably very similar to Veneta's code and Crestwell's code and lots of other small towns. But as I said, it's definitely, I mean, this is your city. And when I said the numbers are really low, I didn't mean that Coburg projects low numbers. I meant that the threshold to trigger a traffic impact analysis is quite low in Coburg, lower than most communities. So the one thing I can think of that would be pretty beneficial, an engineering standard that you would probably appreciate is a signal warrant analysis. There's a number of ways to get there, but when you look at warranting a traffic signal, smaller towns have lower thresholds to where you warrant a traffic signal, just for that reason, that you're not used to sitting somewhere for 2 to 3 minutes waiting to get off of your side street.
Do we have one of those?
Obviously not.
One of what?
A traffic warrant
Signal.
trigger?
Oh, well, those are federal, they're set by the federal government. You can't really mess with a signal warrant. There are ways cities can get a traffic signal if they want one. However, you definitely need to document why you're doing that. You don't just put up traffic signals or stop signs arbitrarily. They cause accidents.
So we don't need to do anything. The traffic warrant code is all in place.
Correct. So that is an interesting subject you brought up, and maybe it's part of this process, maybe it's part of a future code amendment, is if if Coburg's appetite for traffic is significantly less than other places, then perhaps your code should be amended.
Other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead. Counselor McConnell. and
Just a
then Marshall.
comment that it does raise a concern because I believe that we did see negative impact at the development you mentioned. And the citizens had raised quite a few concerns about that. And it doesn't impact the rest of that development. So I think
Well, I just from the public comment, I think it's something that we have to look at probably down the road is do we want to have a lower trigger or lower threshold on certain aspects of the development and what Coburg would want versus a norm or a standard. Because that was definitely the input for that development and others. So I think it's something to mark by and watch. Commissioner Marshall, you had a question. Could you move your mic up? Because I'm having a hard time hearing.
Could I follow up really quick, just to what you were saying though? What you would likely be doing is establishing your own level of service or delay standard. And that is not too uncommon. Like I said, most communities just pick this, well, you're good through level of service D and X number of percentage, they call it VC capacity. City of Eugene, they went the other direction because they assumingly are trying to promote using other modes of travel than automobiles. So, and they don't want to build too much infrastructure downtown. So they actually have an area where they have stopped requiring traffic studies, or they've relaxed their level of service standard from say D to E, saying we're okay with more congestion. You can do the opposite. You can say we don't want as much congestion as other communities. But I do have to caution you, that doesn't mean there won't be new cars on your road. Of course, there's going to be impact if residential land is built with residences or if industrial land is built with industrial uses. There will be new cars. You just have this way of studying it and limits as to how many new cars you can get in a certain facility.
Well, I think everybody needs to be aware that it's not just our residents and our business that we're dealing with in that traffic. More and more, we've got commuters and commercial traffic going through our town that adds to the problem that we really can't put all of it onto the developers that are coming into this town. It just creates, we've got a county highway going through our city.
Right.
And so there's a lot of I know there's a big spider web of issues with that the city is looking at, trying to work through. Commissioner Marshall, you had?
Just a clarification on the open space. Does any of that become city property?
No.
Well, that'll be placed in a conservation easement. It's outlined in the annexation agreement.
Oh, okay, but I mean, if you were thinking about parkland or anything like that, then no. It should be, yeah, conservation.
What does that entail? What is that?
I'm gonna leave that to Henry. This is his world. Henry, can you explain what a conservation easement is, please?
Actually, I'll defer to you, Gary. It just sets aside land.
Essentially,
Gary.
a conservation easement is an easement that leaves the land in its current state. I mean, that's basically what they do.
There's no landscaping requirements or anything like that. It's just,
Well, then there may be associated with that if you have a conservation easement over property for preservation of wildlife. You may have certain improvements that would benefit the wildlife you're trying to enhance. But in a sense, no development can occur in the easement.
thank you.
Right, it's 7 o'clock. Any final questions? I think it was a good discussion. Thanks, everybody, for coming in, and appreciate the good, tough questions and responses. Hopefully it was beneficial to all of us. Ann, do you have anything else that you want to?
No, so you have a copy of this, so there, Henry did share the schedule for how this will be coming to council and planning commission. It's also in your packet tonight in the city administrator's report. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to us and we'll let you know. So do you have anything closing, Henry?
No, I don't. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you, Ann and Gary and Raymond and Damien. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Henry. Raymond, I'll give you one last chance.
I'm good.
Okay.
You know, you'll be seeing a lot of me, so.
All right, thank you very much. This work session is over. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll start our council session.
For the recording, I'm going to stay down. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's us. Just thank you. Yeah. That's done. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, it's great. Ed and I used to put a lot of work together a long time.
John Marshall. Yeah, I know. What timber company? Growth, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. No,